Did you think medieval women were just locked in towers? Have you been picturing them as damsels in distress, with no rights whatsoever? Think again. Number 6. The right to brew beer and run taverns. Ever wondered who made all that medieval ale everyone was drinking? For much of the Middle Ages, brewing was primarily women's work. These female brewers, often called alewives, dominated the industry before it became commercially profitable. In medieval England and many parts of Europe, brewing ale was considered a domestic skill. Just like baking bread or making cheese, women brewed ale in their homes and sold the surplus to neighbors or at local markets. This cottage industry provided women with independent income at a time when economic opportunities were generally limited. Alewives weren't just brewing in their kitchens either. Many owned and operated taverns and alehouses. In 14th century, England records show that women ran approximately 30% of all taverns in some towns. A woman who owned a tavern could support herself and her family without relying on a husband's income. The brewing trade gave women a unique position in the medieval economy. They could inherit brewing equipment from their mothers or female relatives, creating a tradition of female authorship that spanned generations. In medieval Norwich, records show multiple generations of women from the same family running successful brewing operations. Of course, as brewing became more profitable and technologically advanced in the later Middle Ages, men began to take over the industry. Brewing guilds formed that often excluded women or limited their participation. But for centuries, if you wanted to drink in medieval Europe, you were likely buying it from a woman who was running her own business. Number 5. The right to vote in town assemblies. Did you know some medieval women could vote centuries before modern suffrage movements? It might sound impossible, but in certain contexts, medieval women did have voting rights. In many medieval towns, particularly in parts of France and the Low Countries, the right to participate in town assemblies was tied to property ownership or guild membership rather than gender. Widows who inherited property or businesses from their husbands often assumed their voting rights as well. In the flourishing cloth-making town of Ghent, in the 13th century guild records show women voting alongside men in decisions that affected their trade. Similarly, in parts of southern France, women who headed households could participate in the election of town officials and vote on community matters. Perhaps most surprisingly, women in some medieval religious communities had voting rights that would be envied by their secular counterparts. Abbesses and nuns in wealthy convents often voted to elect their leaders and make decisions about their community's governance. The Abbey of Las Huelgas in Spain was so powerful that its abbess could hear confessions and preach sermons, rights usually reserved for priests. Medieval Iceland offers another fascinating example. The Althing, Iceland's parliament, established in 930, allowed certain women to vote on local matters if they were heads of households. These were typically widows or unmarried women who owned land. While these voting rights weren't universal and depended heavily on social class and marital status, they challenged the notion that women's political participation is exclusively a modern phenomenon. Centuries before the suffragettes, some medieval women were already making their voices heard at the ballot box, or whatever passed for one in their time. Number 4. The right to run businesses and join guilds. Ever heard of a female medieval blacksmith? What about women, goldsmiths or leatherworkers? While history books often overlook them, women were active in a surprising variety of trades throughout the Middle Ages. Guild records across Europe reveal women working in professions we might assume were exclusively male. In 14th century Paris, tax records list women working as bookbinders, saddle makers, and even armorer. In London, women were members of various guilds, including prestigious ones like the Goldsmiths' Company and the Skinners' Guild. Some guilds were exclusively female, like the Silk Workers of Paris or the Silk Weavers of Cologne. These organizations provided women with professional training, regulated working conditions, and offered social security benefits similar to those enjoyed by male guild members. Women's participation in guilds varied by region and time period. Generally, women had more economic opportunities in urban areas and during times of labor shortages, such as after the Black Death. In 14th century, Ghent, nearly 25% of guild members in the textile industry were women. Widows often inherited their husband's guild membership and business rights. A blacksmith's widow could continue running her husband's forge, employing journeymen, and training apprentices. Many of these women weren't just placeholded until they remarried. Records show some ran successful businesses for decades after their husbands' deaths. Single women could also establish themselves in business. In 15th century, England, a legal category called femme sole allowed single women to trade independently, sign contracts, and even sue in court rights married women lacked. Records from London show hundreds of women registered as femme soles, running businesses ranging from breweries to textile shops. Even married women found ways to participate in business life. In many medieval towns, couples worked together in family businesses, with wives often managing the financial side of operations, while husbands handled production. When the husband traveled to purchase supplies or sell goods, his wife typically took over all aspects of the business. Medieval women's business activities weren't limited to small-scale operations either. Women like Margherita de' Tini, in 14th century Italy, helped to manage international trading companies. As her merchant husband's partner, Margherita oversaw complex business dealings across the Mediterranean while maintaining detailed accounting records that survive to this day. Number 3. The right to own and inherit property. Who got the family castle when a medieval nobleman died? In many cases, it could legally pass to his daughter. Medieval property rights for women were far more complex and often more favorable than most people realize. While inheritance customs varied widely across Europe, many regions allowed women to inherit land and property. In parts of southern France and Spain, daughters inherited equally alongside sons. The Kingdom of Navarre was particularly progressive. Its laws gave daughters the same inheritance rights as sons as early as the 11th century. Even in England, where primogeniture, inheritance by the eldest son, was common for aristocratic families, women could and did inherit land when there were no male heirs. The massive Gloucester estates passed to 3 sisters in 1245, when their brother died without children, making them among the wealthiest landowners in England. Medieval women didn't just inherit property, they controlled it too. English common law recognized a concept called paraphernalia, which protected a married woman's personal property, like clothing, jewelry, and household items from her husband's control. More importantly, many regions developed legal frameworks that allowed women to maintain ownership of their inheritance and dowry property even after marriage. In parts of Italy and southern France, the dowry system actually benefited women by providing them with property that remained legally theirs even within marriage. Their husbands could use these assets, but couldn't sell them without permission. When widowed women reclaimed full control of their dowry property, often giving them financial independence. Widows' property rights were particularly strong in many regions. Across much of Europe, widows were entitled to a portion of their husband's property, typically 1/3 to 1/2 as dower, to support them for the rest of their lives. This wasn't charity, but a legally enforceable right. Medieval court records are filled with cases of widows successfully suing their late husbands' families to secure their property rights. Female monasticism provided another avenue for women to control property. Abbesses of wealthy convents managed extensive land holdings, collected rents, and made independent economic decisions. The abbess of Fontfroid in France oversaw dozens of priories and their associated lands across multiple countries. Women also created strategic property arrangements through clever use of legal instruments. In 14th century London, wealthy widow Alice Perrers established complex property trusts to maintain control of her extensive holdings despite remarrying. Similarly, noblewoman Elizabeth de Burgh used legal maneuvering to maintain control of her vast estates through multiple marriages. Women's property ownership wasn't just limited to passive landholding either. Medieval women actively managed agricultural enterprises, oversaw castle construction, and made decisions about land use. The notebooks of Lady Margaret Paston from 15th century England reveal her detailed involvement in managing family properties, from negotiating with tenants to organizing building repairs. Number 2. The right to receive education and create literature. Was education only for men in the Middle Ages? Not quite. While educational opportunities weren't equal, medieval women found various paths to learning, and some became renowned scholars and writers. The most accessible education for women existed within convents. Nunneries throughout Europe maintained libraries and schools where women learned to read and write, studied theology, and sometimes received instruction in subjects like mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The Benedictine Abbey of Barking in England was known for its educated nuns who copied manuscripts and composed original works. Even outside religious life, noble and wealthy urban women often received education. Many noble households employed tutors who taught daughters alongside sons in childhood, though boys might continue to universities that excluded women. Christine de Pizan, one of medieval Europe's most famous female authors, received her education at home in the French royal court, where her father served as court astrologer. Women's literacy rates varied dramatically by region, time, period, and social class. In 15th century London, research suggests that perhaps 10% of women could read, mainly from merchant and noble families. In Italian cities like Florence, female literacy appears to have been higher, with merchant families educating daughters to help in family businesses. Beyond basic literacy, some medieval women achieved remarkable scholarly accomplishments. Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German abbess, wrote extensive works on theology, medicine, natural history, and music. Her medical texts described hundreds of plants and their uses, while her musical compositions are still performed today. Women didn't just consume knowledge, they created it. Julian of Norwich, a 14th century English anchoress, wrote Revelations of Divine Love, considered the first book written in English by a woman. Marjorie Kempe, a contemporary of Julian's, dictated what many scholars consider the first autobiography in English. In the Islamic world of medieval Spain and North Africa, some women achieved high levels of education. Princess Walaba bent Mustakfi established a literary salon in 11th century Córdoba, where she taught poetry and literature to women. The writings of female Andalusian poets like Walada and Hafsa bint al-Hajj were preserved and celebrated. Secular women writers emerged increasingly in the later Middle Ages. Marie de France, writing in 12th century England, produced sophisticated narrative poems that influenced the development of medieval literature. In 14th century Venice, Christine de Pizan supported herself and her children through her writing after being widowed, producing dozens of works, including the Book of the City of Ladies, which defended women's intellectual capacities. The rise of vernacular literature, works in local languages rather than Latin, created new opportunities for women's literary participation. Italian noblewoman Caterina Sforza compose a manuscript of medical and cosmetic recipes in the 15th century. German noblewoman Elizabeth von Nassau-Saarbrücken translated French romances into German for aristocratic readers. Women also participated in book production and ownership. Illuminated manuscripts sometimes depict female scribes and artists. Invenute records and wills show women owning books, from religious texts to romances and practical manuals. Margaret Beaufort, mother of England's King Henry VII, assembled an impressive library and patronized early English printers. Number 1. The right to rule kingdoms and lead armies. Who really wore the crown in medieval Europe? More women than you might think. From ruling queens to powerful regents, women exercised political power at the highest levels throughout the Middle Ages. Eleanor of Aquitaine stands among the most powerful figures of the 12th century, male or female. As Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, she controlled more French territory than the French king himself. After marrying Henry II of England, she ruled England as regent during his absences, and later supported her sons' rebellion against their father. Even imprisonment couldn't diminish her influence. After Henry's death, she secured the English throne for her son Richard and again served as regent while he was on crusade. Blanche of Castile, who ruled France as regent for her young son Louis IX in the 13th century, crushed rebellions, negotiated peace treaties, and strengthened royal authority so effectively that the kingdom remained stable even during the king's 6-year absence on crusade. Medieval chroniclers, though often hostile to female rule, grudgingly admired her political acumen. In Iberia, Queen Urraca ruled the kingdom of Leon Castile in her own right from 1109 to 1126. Despite facing rebellion and an unhappy political marriage, she successfully defended her inheritance and passed it intact to her son. Her contemporary, Countess Teresa of Portugal, ruled her territory so effectively that she laid the groundwork for Portugal's eventual independence. Eastern Europe saw several powerful female rulers. Queen Jadwiga of Poland, crowned king at age 10 in 1384, ruled in her own right before marrying the Grand Duke of Lithuania, creating a powerful dynastic union. In Russia, Princess Olga of Kiev ruled as regent for her son in the 10th century and was later canonized as a saint for her political achievements and conversion to Christianity. Byzantine Empress Irene of Athens ruled the Eastern Roman Empire first as regent and then in her own name from 797 to 802. She was the first woman to hold the Byzantine throne in her own right, even issuing coins with her image on both sides, a privilege previously reserved for male emperors. Women led armies and defended castles during sieges more frequently than popular history acknowledges. During the anarchy, a civil war in 12th century England, Matilda of Boulogne raised armies to fight for her husband's claim to the throne, while her rival, Empress Matilda, commanded troops defending her own claim. Countess Jeanne de Montfort led the defense of Hennebont during the Breton War of Succession, personally leading sorties against the besieging forces. In Italy, Caterina Sforza defended the city of Forli with remarkable courage. When rebels held her children hostage and threatened to kill them unless she surrendered the city's fortress, she reportedly lifted her skirts on the ramparts, pointed to her reproductive organs, and shouted that she had the equipment to make more children. The legendary Cyclegaita of Salerno, wife of Norman adventurer Robert Guiscard, reportedly rode into battle wearing full armor. Anna Comini's historical account describes her riding in full armor like a man and showing amazing boldness and courage during a battle against Byzantine forces. Women's military leadership extended beyond Europe. Queen Tamara of Georgia led her armies to multiple victories in the early 13th century, expanding Georgian territory to its greatest historical extent. In the Islamic world, Shahr al-Dur briefly ruled Egypt after her husband's death during the Seventh Crusade, defeating the Crusader army and capturing King Louis IX of France. Even when not officially ruling, medieval noblewomen often exercised significant political power. They served as diplomatic envoys, negotiated marriages that sealed political alliances, and advised kings. Powerful abbesses like Hildegard of Bingen corresponded with popes and emperors, influencing church policies and political decisions. Were these powerful medieval women feminists fighting for equality? No. They were pragmatic leaders, operating within the social structures of their time, often emphasizing their exceptional status rather than challenging gender norms broadly. But their existence proves that medieval society was more complex than the simplistic, oppressed medieval woman stereotype suggests. Did these medieval rights mean women enjoyed equality with men? Of course not. But doesn't their existence challenge everything we thought we knew about women's history?